Well, you know,
Hello, everyone. Um, Before we begin, I want to make sure that everyone mutes their phones so we don't have any um, unnecessary background noise while everyone is presenting. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is on this Zoom right now. I want to say thank you to everyone who is participating as well. This is a very special Zoom that we're having as we honor Dr. Rosalyn Howard's work and her legacy. So I'll begin with an introduction and then we'll let our speakers take it from there. So this is from Dr. Rosalyn's biography that's on the University of Central Florida's website. It states, Professor Rosalyn Howard was an associate professor of anthropology at UCF. She specializes in cultural anthropology, and her primary area of research is ethno-historical studies of the African diaspora, with the focus on the interrelationships formed by African and Indigenous peoples in the Americas and the Caribbean. Dr. Howard conducted extensive research among mixed Native African populations in the Bahamas and Bermuda. Among her publications is the book entitled Black Seminoles in the Bahamas, an ethnographic study of the Black Seminole descendant community of Red Bay's Andros Island, Bahamas.
and with that,
Oh, I have one more thing to say.
oh yes, sorry.
Her dedication in the Black Seminoles of the Bahamas reads, this book is dedicated with love, respect, and gratitude to my parents, Odessa and Percy, and to my son, Jamil. They truly are the wind beneath my wings. And here is Dr. Howard's son, Jamil.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you very much for that, Wendy, and thank you for putting all of this together to honor my mother. Again, my name is Jamil Smith. Very proud son of Dr. Rosalyn Howard, and here coming to you from Boston, where I'm the editor-in-chief of the Emancipator magazine. I just want to speak from the heart very briefly to open tonight's program. Being reminded of my mother's research through the conversations we've had leading up to this event has been a really wonderful thing. But it's more about the experiences that she would share with me, whether she shared them in person or she shared them in relating to me what she was doing. That really gave me so much joy, and just, of course, knowing her journey before she became a professor, it was really incredibly fulfilling. Even as a young person, to see my mother be able to realize her dream of telling stories about people who in this world have been forgotten, have been disregarded, have been ignored. And that mission is something that I carry with me in my own work. And I'm very proud to not just be her descendant from a genealogical standpoint, but be just a descendant from an ideological standpoint. I actually went to Red Bays with her for only one day. She knew that me being a 20-year-old college student, being new to Red Bays might be a little bit much for me, but there's so much she managed to pack into that day. I saw so much and experienced so much. And reading her dissertation and later her book, having seen and met so many of these people, it brought all of that to life. And I do hope that as we continue to examine and expand upon her scholarship, that we can make other people who are reading and listening and understanding what she had to offer. I hope that we can help them see these people as wonderfully vividly as my mother painted them in her book, and whenever she talked about the folks who she studied and she related to. Um, One of the things there was a recent tribute to my mother, unfortunately, that I was unable to attend, and I sent them a statement. I want to read part of it because I think it's relevant to what we're going to be discussing tonight. She loved this work so dearly, and in the wake of her passing, um, our charge today and going forward is to not merely honor her contributions in each of our own ways. We have to continue that work. It's up to us now. My mother cared so much about so many people and so deeply, and it's up to us to meet that standard. Um, I really do hope that we're up to the challenge and we're going to do the very best that we can. I'm sure that, starting tonight, and I really do want to thank everyone that's present here, particularly Dr. Elsie McCord, her partner. I really want, and my auntie, hi auntie, Dr. Ovella McIntyre. Um, I'm really grateful for their
Whoa.
support and how well they've kept me standing, particularly through the last couple of years. With that, I do want to pivot to an excerpt from my mother's book. This was her copy of Black Seminoles in the Bahamas, and the quote here we have is: "The topic has both personal and professional significance to me. As one of the millions of North Americans whose background includes African and Native American ancestry, and whose identity is ascribed as African American, owing to the rule of hypodescent, one drop of Black blood making you Black, in the United States, I find it critically important to contribute to a more inclusive perspective of American," she put that in quotes, "ethnohistory." And again, I challenge us to meet that standard and to join her in that pursuit. And with that, I will toss to Dr. Anthony Dixon.
Thank you so much, Jamil. Anthony, are you on? Let me read your bio.
Okay.
Let me read your bio. Yeah. So here is Dr. Anthony Dixon, who every time I ask him to do something always shows up. So thank you. Dr. Dixon is a native of Fort Valley, Georgia. In 1994, he received his BS in history with a minor in African American Studies from Florida A&M University. In 2001, he received his Master's of Applied Social Science from Florida A&M University with a concentration in history. In 2001, he received a doctoral fellowship from Indiana University's History Department, where he majored in the African diaspora. His studies included African American history and African history with a minor in library science, specifically special collections and archives. In 2006, he became a visiting professor at Florida A&M University, as well as the head archivist and historian for the John G. Riley Museum. In the following year, 2007, he completed his dissertation entitled Black Seminole Involvement and Leadership During the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, and received a PhD in history from Indiana University. Dr. Dixon has also published 2 public history books, Florida's Negro War, Black Seminoles in the Second Seminole War, which was released in the spring of 2014. This work is a historical piece that examines the Black Seminole leadership and involvement in the Second Seminole War. Florida's Negro War also re-examines the war in the context of a slave rebellion. In the fall of the same year, 2014, Dr. Dixon published his 3rd book, Florida's African Diaspora Timeline. This book was created with the ideals of assisting in the infusion of Florida's Black history into the public educational system. Dr. Dixon feels that the more pride our young African Americans have in themselves, the more inclined they are to succeed. His current project, the Black Seminole Project, is based on his book, Florida's Negro War, and will culminate in both the documentary and a feature film. All right, Dr. Dixon.
All right, thank you. Ooh, that was a lot. Anyway, when I was first asked to speak on Dr. Howard, I immediately went back to the first time I actually got a chance to meet her because she left such an impression on me two ways. The first way was she basically had this calm demeanor. I eased up next to her. I sat down next to her. We were at a conference, at a Florida Historic Preservation Conference, a Black Historic Preservation Conference. And so I slid next to her. I was in graduate school. I was still working on my dissertation. I was ABD at the time. And so I went to talk to her and discuss. I introduced myself to her, and she kept looking forward. She didn't look at me. And so I went on telling her that I was also looking at the Black Seminoles here in Florida in the Second Seminole War, and I told her about how I read her book and I learned a lot and I was using it and all that good stuff. And she finally looked at me and was like, "So are you going to get it done?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm gonna get it done." I was thinking she was about to ask me something, about what I read or some research. And she just asked me, was I gonna get it done? And so it made me think about the stories I heard about John Hope Franklin meeting W.E.B. and W.E.B. kind of giving him the same thing and letting him know, it's about the work, and so then the second thing was when she actually spoke and she did her speech. And she started out with such a command of her subject and such a command of the topic of Black Seminoles in the Bahamas that you knew she was on top of everything, that she had done the most thorough research. But then it went from this lecture field to this discussion. And then by the time she finished and people asked her questions, by the time she wrapped up and then people started asking her questions, it was a talk. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't just a speech, but it was actually a talk. And so from that, I garnered and I was like, yeah, I want the same thing. I want to have the same command of subject, but I want to be able to relate it in a way that Doc just did, that it turns into a talk and that people are engaged and we simply garner and give information back and forth. She laid, the foundation, and I felt like that's what you do. You lay the foundation, but then you begin to engage people such that it's not this classroom setting, but it's actually just a talk where people are learning together and being able to strengthen their knowledge and take something out of it that they can use now. And so that was my real first introduction on how to really do, and take rather our academic work and really relay it and get it out into the public, during our speaking and engagements as such. So I'm always grateful to Dr. Howard for that in teaching me and helping me understand how you take the information, but you get it to the people in the form of simply a conversation. And that's pretty much uh, what I have to say about Doc and how she, not only her work, of course, influenced my work, but how she, as a person, also influenced my life.
All right, thank you, Anthony. I'm gonna put a quote of hers up on the screen. Would you be okay with reading it?
You want me to read the quote?
Yeah,
Okay.
here it is. Do you see it?
My rite of passage into the profession of anthropology commenced in November 1996. I arrived in Red Bay's Andros Island, Bahamas, to begin my one-year residency, toting conscious and subconscious baggage, bulging with westernized womanist views that was gradually unpacked over the course of the next year.
All right.
Dr. Rosalyn.
Thank you. All right, and next up we have Matt Griffin.
All right,
And
there we go. Thanks.
I have a short bio for you, Matt, before you begin. Mr. Matt Griffin is a living historian, meaning he works to showcase information about the past through immersive presentations. He primarily portrays a Black Seminole Indian from the 1830s and 1840s and has participated in historical reenactments for 20 years. So thank you so much for being with us, Matt.
Yeah, no, definitely it's a pleasure and honor to be here. And yeah, and just to be able to remember Dr. Howard and stuff. So last night when we were on the call, I started looking through some old scrapbooks and stuff. And I found a couple pictures. So I'm gonna try to share my screen just to show a couple pictures and stuff.
Let me send it to you. Let me make you the host real quick. Let's see. All right, there you go.
All right.
Might take a, oh yeah, should be good.
All right, so I think it's on this screen here. So can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I really wanted to start with this picture because I feel like this one gets used a lot with presentations and books and stuff. But to me, it really just sums up what Dr. Howard was to me and my family, and that was she was family. And once we got to know each other, doing the reenactments and everything else, and kind of getting immersed in living history and stuff, she became. I mean, she was like another mom, another aunt and stuff to me. So, but when we were talking last night, I was just trying to like remember stories and stuff about her and everything else, and I found some pictures, and this is one of the ones that I found was from the first day that I actually met Dr. Howard. And this was at the book signing in Orlando. I was trying to find the newspaper article. I couldn't find it, but my uncle John mentioned, "Hey, we're gonna go to this book signing over in Orlando. This is a professor that wrote this book about the Black Seminoles down in the Bahamas." And I think I was like 12 at the time. I was like, oh, "Okay, cool. That'll be fun to go to go see that." So we did, and I think from that first day, yeah, it was immediate. Her and my uncle, just talking about history and just getting like the conversations they would have sometimes. I mean, being a young kid, just I wouldn't even stay in the room all the time because I'm like, this is y'all been going on for 3 hours. Like, I got other stuff to do. But she really did become family, and over time, she got to where she invited me and my uncle to come over to UCF, and I started speaking at her school, her anthropology classes and stuff. And I mean, looking back at it now, for me to have that opportunity, here she is a professor already, but coming and asking me and my uncle to come over and share her classroom with us, that was just amazing. But and it kind of set the stage for some of the stuff that we would do later on. But since she had wrote the book about the Black Seminoles in the Bahamas, she hadn't really done any of the living history events, which was kind of our forte. So started encouraging her to come over and like, well, come see what we do, like actually bringing history alive and stuff. So that's exactly what she did. She started coming to some of the events with us and just became part of the camp. And it was fun watching her like interact with some of the other historians and stuff that we knew at the time, and just them sharing stories or sharing research, and just kind of being at their footsteps, to hear some of the stuff or just the projects and stuff that she wanted to work on and everything. um so eventually, it got to the point where she had talked about Red Bay so much, and she had talked to my uncle a couple times about even taking me down to Red Bays. So I'm glad I got the opportunity to go to Red Bays and stuff with her. And I spent 2 weeks down there, and I mean, remarkable. It's the only way I can sum that up. To be able to go down and meet some of the people that she had wrote about, and just kind of see that other element um, to the whole story and stuff. So I'm really happy that she was able to do that with me. Um, you know, the people in these pictures and stuff, I wouldn't have never been able to meet them, or probably wouldn't have never been able to have that opportunity to meet them if it had not been for Dr. Howard. And thinking enough of me at the time, and my family, to want to take me and share that part of her story and her work and stuff with me. And I can remember just like, I'd say, playing amateur anthropologist with her while she was interviewing people and stuff, and she'd be writing stuff down. And I remember we were at the hotel in Nassau, and somebody made a comment about something, and she kind of just jotted it down, but I jotted it down too. And we were talking, like, comparing notes later on, and I was like, well, what about this? And she's like, I don't know about that. And I was like, well, because I had so much time around the Seminoles and stuff, I kind of knew what that was. So like that was like us sharing like I don't know, she had kind of had like a proud mom moment and stuff too. And I remember just I was saying some stuff, but I was using the lingo from some of the people that we had met over the weekend, and she kind of snapped around and was like, "Oh, look at you looking using the lingo and stuff down here." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you know." So it was awesome. But and then the last picture that I had here on the slide was just from the reunion back in 2012. That she was instrumental in getting me and my uncle on discussion panels and stuff there. Um, I was talking to a young man a couple years ago, and he hadn't got the chance to meet her yet. And I would definitely say in the last couple years that I guess it's made me realize more and more, especially like looking at this picture and stuff, that I'm so blessed and so appreciative. I'm not that old, but I'm glad that I came along when I did, because of the people that I've gotten to meet along the way. That young man didn't, as far as I know, he never got a chance to meet Dr. Howard. Um, so, but I was able to share my stories and my experiences um, from going to Red Bays and doing the reenactments with her, and going and speaking at her classes and stuff. And he just thought that was the coolest thing, and it really is, because she was such an amazing person, and such an amazing professor and anthropologist, and an advocate for her work and stuff. And it just makes me proud that her legacy is not only going to live on through me, but through everybody here on this call and stuff too. As we continue to like do the work that she originally started and stuff. So, yeah, no, I'm just proud of that, and happy to have known her.
Thank you, Matt. I think you have to make me host again, right?
Yes, and that is. Hold on just a second.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, gotta find you on the list of everybody here.
I know. And then once you do that, I'm going to put up a quote. Would you mind reading the quote?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me screen. 1 second. All right, there it is.
All right. My mission to address the historical and structural amnesia that obscures African and indigenous peoples' interactions and neglects their integral role in the historiography of the Americas and the Caribbean, the New World. Begins in chapter 1 with an explication of this history and exploration of how the slave trade transformed the landscape of North America. Dr. Rosalyn Howard.
Thank you. All right. Our next guest, Mr. Stefan Moss, he had informed that he'll be running a little late. So what I'll do is I'll go on to the next quote, and then from there, our next speaker will be Ms. Vicki Oldham. All right, so here's another quote from Dr. Rosalyn. She said, "Despite my being initially suspected as a DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency agent, my work among Red Bayans progressed relatively rather smoothly. Most residents in the settlement were eventually convinced that I was not an agent of the DEA, and equally important, not rich." All right. So, Ms. Vicki, I have a short bio for you, and then after I finish that, then we'll take it over.
Okay.
Vicki Oldham, MFA, is president and CEO of the Sarasota African American Cultural Coalition, Inc. SAACC's goal is to open an art center and history museum. The precursor of this historic preservation initiative is Newtown Alive. Led by Oldham, the project traces the history of Newtown, one of Sarasota's oldest communities. Newtown Alive products include a research report, a book, historical markers, a documentary short, a guided trolley tour, traveling exhibition, walking tours, a mobile app, oral history interviews, an inventory of historic structures, a podcast series, and newtownalive.org, the official website. The project has received local and state awards. Visit Sarasota County named Miss Oldham the 2020 Voice of Tourism. So congratulations on that award. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored. And I feel honored to be, I believe, carrying on my mentor's work. I wrote an editorial about Rosalyn Howard, and I'd like to read excerpts of it and then sprinkle in some personal stories of my visit to Red Bays with her. Woo, they make me laugh. Anyway, I hear Dr. Rosalyn Howard's voice in all of the Looking for Angola resources that our team created from the time we began the search for artifacts related to the 1800s Black Seminole settlement in 2005. Howard compiled archaeological, cultural, and archival evidence of the early 19th century Florida Maroon community, formerly located in East Bradenton and in parts of Sarasota. Her fingerprints are on the materials that document Newtown's 100-year history. Newtown Alive's resources, the podcast series, the markers, have her stamp of approval. The humanities scholar with the cut to the chase candor was an inspiration to me. And volunteer researchers who comb Tampa Bay libraries and databases to find primary and secondary source documents about the history of Sarasota's Black community. Howard sifted through private collections, books, albums, flyers, and programs to add historical context to the actions of early pioneers and civil rights leaders. To meet humanities standards and the city of Sarasota's deadline for completion of this project, Rosalyn and I worked into the wee hours, reviewing photographs, matching content, posting captions, writing chapters, and debating sentence construction. For a year, she had lived among the people of Red Bays and studied their lives, language, and struggles. Well, I traveled with her to conferences to listen, learn, and speak, to festivals and historic sites, and witness a committed anthropologist working in her element. And after work, the real fun began. Okay, I traveled to Red Bays with her, and we stayed in Nassau for a day. And we toured around Nassau. The people of Nassau knew her. I think one 4th of July, we went to, well, no, it wasn't 4th of July. It was their independence in the Bahamas. And we went to the Capitol, to their party with fireworks, and everybody was dressed to the nines. The food was so good. And we danced the night away at that Independence Day celebration. And then the next day, we left from a packed airport of people flying to their family island. Our plane was very, very small. I was nervous and wondered whether my family would ever find me in an emergency but I tried not to show that I was nervous. Well, Rosalyn had made the trip many times. We made it to our destination in less than 30 minutes, and her friend Gertie was at the makeshift airport to meet us. Rosalyn stuffed our bags into the car, and we drove down a long, bumpy, and dusty road for miles to Red Bays. The two women laughed, and they caught up on island lore. The people, the craftsmen, the artists of all ages adored Rosalyn. She always packed her luggage with clothes and gifts for the children. We explored cemeteries and tiny food shacks. She taught history, introduced me to more people and culture, and she revered village history because of her own ancestry. I remember we slept at one of her friends' homes, who was the president she was the principal, headmaster of a school there in Red Bays. And we slept in the same room, and we were so exhausted, so tired. I saw a little lizard in the corner of the room, and I am so afraid of lizards. Elsie knows I hate lizards. Rosalyn, I pointed out the lizard to Rosalyn. Rosalyn just kind of dismissed it and said, "Oh, you're going to be okay. Oh, you're going to be fine. Just go to sleep." And she promptly fell right asleep. Not me. I was up all night watching that lizard, making sure that he stayed in that corner of the room. But her what is it? She was just such a natural anthropologist. Nothing was a frightful experience to her, particularly not a little lizard. Of course not. Anyway, We enjoyed the water views and the food and the people. And I can say this, that my research partner, mentor, and friend taught me how to honor diverse people, culture, and history. In the Newtown Alive book Rosalyn wrote, it was an honor to work on the Neighborhood History Project, and added that we inspired her. Well, it was mutual. She honored and inspired us by amplifying our Newtown history and showing that it mattered. She's always going to be remembered in this community as long as I am here and as long as I am doing this Newtown Alive work. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That was beautiful. Before we go on to the next speaker, Ms. Oldham, would you mind reading a quote from Rosalyn that I'll put up on the screen in 1 second?
Okay.
All right, there it is.
Another aspect of my mission is to present for the first time an in-depth rendering of the essence of social memory that sustains the Black Seminole heritage of Red Bays.
Yeah, and thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Dr. Wallace Tinney. So I will read her bio. Dr. Wallace Ham Tinney, granddaughter of the late Seminole Florence Ealer Jones Ham, is a native of West Palm Beach, Florida. Dr. Tinney's grandmother, Florence, left her native home in the village of Miccosukee on the edge of Tallahassee, Florida, to go to Tampa, Florida. Later, she married James Ham and went to West Palm Beach with her husband in the second decade of the 20th century. Their union included 7 children, one of whom was Dr. Tinney's father. Dr. Tinney has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Florida A&M University, a Master of Arts from the University of Florida, and a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Iowa. Dr. Tinney serves as president of Florida Black Historical Research Project, Inc., a Florida nonprofit organization dedicated to reclaiming and publishing lost and repressed history of Black and Brown and Red people. Dr. Tinney is a retired college professor and former protocol officer of the city of Miami. As a longtime cultural programmer, she was one of the chief organizers of Miami's annual Pan-African Book Fest and Cultural Conference, spearheaded by the African American Caribbean Cultural Arts Commission, which she co-founded. As president of Florida Black Historical Research Project, Inc., Dr. Tinney has worked diligently with the help of family members and others for the last 17 years to continue the work of honoring the sacred site of her ancestors, work begun by her cousin, Seminole Maroon descendant Issa Ham Bryant, one of the driving forces behind the reclamation of Loxahatchee River Park as a battlefield site in Jupiter, Florida. Okay, Dr. Tinney.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Wendy.
No problem.
Because I think I was whatever, muted. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to have the opportunity to honor someone of the stature of Dr. Rosalyn Howard. I wrote a little something to share with you. Dr. Rosalyn Howard and I felt an immediate kinship as we commiserated with one another over the loss of one's mother. Dr. Howard had recently lost her mother and was finding that living with the loss was very difficult. We shared experiences and bonded as friends. On the occasion that she was finally free to speak at our annual Martin Luther King outdoor weekend event at Loxahatchee River Battlefield, Dr. Howard arrived and was met by a virtual downpour with very little shelter in sight. In other words, she was literally rained out. That Dr. Howard's model for anthropological study was Zora Neale Hurston is significant because it means that she was willing to shed her preconceptions and enter the new culture in Andros with a mind open to questioning its own judgments, a mind ready to embrace the countryside refrain, all a we is one. And that's what she did. As you could hear, as Vicki Oldham just gave you a beautiful idea of her, how she was received in the Bahamas during that time, during her, or even up until her death. One of the questions she studied was Red Bay's folklore. Accordingly, she found that there may be a kind of synthesis of African and Seminole, a synthesis possibly found in the character called Chicharni. It's an owl type folklore figure. Wendy?
All right, 1 second.
I'm going to read to you from her book what this figure is that she writes about in her book. We got this figure from the young man there who is an outstanding sculptor, Henry Wallace. Thank you, Jean. Henry Wallace, who has, I met his son in Bradenton this last time that we were there. It's Vicky's Festival in Bradenton. The folklore, according to legend, this figure, the Chicharni, she says the Chicharnis, in making their nests, tied branches across the pathways past which the cruel slave masters dared not go for fear they would never return. Some people say that Chicharni was the name of a tribe of Indians who used to help the slaves, but this has never been proven. On the other hand, it is quite definitely known that these little bird-like creatures help them. Like the leprechauns, they have many human attributes, but they also have terrific power. They can pass over great distances, they can go through walls, they cast no shadow because they are known to be in touch with man's higher nature. Thank you, Wendy. Now this kind of figure is interesting because Mr. Wallace told us, he told me, you should get this because you put it there and it will keep all evil away from your home. And it's true, no evil has come here. But one of the things I wish that it would have guarded against was all the things you have to do, like all the repairs, the termites and different things. It did not do anything for that. That's a joke, people. But anyway, the Chicharni, that folkloric figure, is one of the ones that she writes about in the book. As Matthew Griffin said earlier, one of the questions she studied, as Matthew Griffin said earlier, it was a dream of Dr. Howard's to reunite the Seminole diaspora that had been forced into exile in the 19th century. She saw this wish come to fruition in 2012, as he mentioned, in St. Augustine, as the descendants of Seminoles from Mexico, Texas, the Bahamas, Oklahoma, and Florida united on Florida soil. When I approached Dr. Howard about duplicating her reunion at Loxahatchee Battlefield in Jupiter, she said yes enthusiastically and wrote a wonderful letter of support that contributed in large part to our receiving a $50,000 grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We used this grant to reunite the diaspora. Dr. Howard was seriously ill, Wendy, but she was hell-bent on attending this event, and she did. This is she in her little wheelchair that she came around. She was seriously ill, but she was determined. She was, like I said, hell-bent on being a part of this reunion, and she was there and welcomed joyously by everyone, and I think everybody, I mean, people cried when they saw her because it was such a beautiful thing. Wendy, you can also show the other picture. Do you have it? You didn't do the other picture? Okay, that's fine. This is the newspaper article that was written, and the newspaper publisher decided to use that picture there in the newspaper article that was written about the event. And that's a picture, and it includes on the right side our guest speaker Chris Cornelius and Glenn Bagels, who just stepped down as president of the Loxahatchee River Battlefield Preservationists. And in the middle bottom picture, all of our people, not all of them, but people from Mexico on the panel there. And in the top picture, the young man, what's his name? Mr. Norfus from Boynton, who talks about the presence of Seminoles in the Boynton Beach area. All of this, all of the work that we did was directly related to what the kind of input that Rosalyn put into helping me to find speakers, helping me to get the program grounded, and she was determined to be there. God bless her. Thank you, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tinney. Next up, we have Mr. Dinizulu Jean Tinney, who is sitting right next to his beautiful wife. Two of my favorite people. So I'll read your bio and then the floor is yours. Dinizulu Jean Tinney is a New York-born, Miami-based visual artist, writer, retired educator, independent researcher, and community activist in cultural affairs, social justice, and historic preservation projects, with a formal academic background in foreign languages, linguistics, and literature, with a special focus on New World African cultural and linguistic retentions and reinventions. His artworks have been widely exhibited and collected and include a number of public art installations and monument designs. His commentaries and scholarly articles have appeared in local newspapers and in academic journals. Much of his artwork and research is centered around the history and heritage of the Middle Passage. And he is co-director of a Middle Passage ship replica project to create a virtual and physical international traveling museum, educational research center, and ancestral memorial shrine. He is a member of the Florida Black Historical Research Project, directed by his wife and Professor Emeritus of English, Dr. Wallace Ham Tinney.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm going to try what some people say is impossible for me, which is to be brief. I will kind of build on what Wallace was sharing with you, and I want to just take a slightly different tack on this, because all of us, needless to say, have wonderful memories and uh, personal experiences with our friendship with Roz, and certainly that's one of the most special friendships that we've had, because it grew from my knowing her to both of us and Wallace really bonding with her, and then she got to know our daughters, and all the while it was just so, everything was so natural that Wallace asked me today if I could remember. I can't even remember when, how, or where I actually first met her, because it seemed like we were always just kind of, a family. So what I, there are many things that we could look at, and it's kind of natural for me to kind of point out her persona away from anthropology as an art collector, very knowledgeable, and one who actually could not only appreciate the art in its own right, but who could bring her anthropological knowledge and expertise to it. As Wallace was sharing, she educated us about the Chicharni, in addition, both in the book and by the conversation. But what I'd like to touch on and just share, it goes back to what Jamil mentioned at the outset, which kind of set the tone, I think, for this wonderful remembrance that we're doing, which is pretty much to say that it's as much about the future as it is about the past. This is much about us carrying on the work. And what struck me with her work as an anthropologist was that in many ways she carried on a tradition that got started by Zora Neale Hurston, as Wallace mentioned, and Catherine Dunham. I'll kind of preface it by saying this. Wallace alluded to the Middle Passage, otherwise known as the misnomer of the Atlantic slave trade, because it wasn't slaves and it wasn't a trade. But it's kind of remarkable that out of those millions of people that were trafficked across the Atlantic for more than 400 years, less than 5% of that traffic came into North America. And yet, African North America, for reasons I think that are yet to be fully fathomed, has exerted this really, disproportionately large cultural and spiritual influence just on world culture, in sports, and in music, and in creativity, and so many other realms. And so, and I say that without any kind of chauvinism or anything like that. I mean, it's not, when we recognize those things, it's not in the spirit of, what some people call ethnic boosterism, but it's really more like recognizing the responsibility we have, the value of the legacy that we're, privileged, I like to say forced, obligated, challenged, and blessed to have. And so in that context, I think that this legacy started with these African American women from North America actually redefining this whole science of anthropology. I mean, it started out, it was inspired by the science of linguistics, the idea that, cultures and so forth could actually be studied scientifically, not just with prejudices and just subjective judgments, but that you could actually see the equality of all people's experiences and the like. Of course, it wasn't long before the science of anthropology went into the service of colonialism. It was more like studying people to see how they could be used and managed and so forth. And but what these women brought to the science was that you didn't go there to study the people as spies. The people were not, instead of being objects of your study, they became subjects. These women joined the people, respected, and so forth. And I think Jamil put it well when you said, the people that she studied and related to. And that was revolutionary. It doesn't get recognized fully for how seminal that was in terms of taking an academic discipline and really turning it on its head so that it actually served a much more positive purpose. And so, we think of Zora Neale Hurston, Catherine Dunham, going to Haiti and actually becoming part of that culture. Catherine Dunham was initiated as a mambo in the Vodun culture and so forth. And so we fast forward to Dr. Howard applying this in our time. And that legacy is something, this is a gift that we've been given. And I really do hope that more of us get to appreciate her work, get to read her book, and get to make ourselves each an anthropologist in our own right, in the spirit that Roz kind of bequeathed to us. So with that, I just say, we give thanks, and Godspeed to her as she begins her new journey. In another place, I'm sure the ancestors are proud and being as inspired as we are by her presence. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. So now we'll go to Stefan Moss. If Stefan, you're ready, I'll read your bio really quickly and then I'll let you have the floor. Stefan Moss is an environmental scientist and educator. As a scientist, he has worked in the public sector on United Nations-related projects in the Caribbean, including the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, most recently assisting in the completion of the Bahamas National Implementation Plan. In the private sector, he parlayed his experience in ecotoxicology to work on environmental remediation projects in the United States and the Bahamas for Fortune 500 companies such as ExxonMobil and BP. Moss is a former adjunct professor of environmental science at Georgia State University and has held other academic appointments at Lincoln College of Technology and Georgia Military College. In 2014, he launched the Moss Group, which provides diversity, education, and inclusion, DEI, mentorship, and environmental stewardship training services for public and private organizations, including the U.S. National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, Greening Youth Foundation, and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. He holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biology from Lee University and a master's degree in environmental science from the University of Tennessee.
Hi, everybody. It is truly an honor to be able to say just even a few words about Dr. Howard. My experiences with her were much briefer than my colleagues that were mentioned, but the impact was no less important and really transformative for me. So my story with Dr. Howard begins in 2017, 2018. I launched a website called the Saltwater Underground Railroad, and I was inspired to launch this website because I came into contact with her book, her ethnography. And I'm from the Bahamas, born and raised, spent time in Andros as a kid. My mother grew up in Andros. My aunt lived in Andros, still lives there, and spent many summers in Andros not knowing the rich history of Andros Island, not knowing anything about Black Seminole history and culture, not knowing anything about the importance of these stories that Dr. Howard was able to bring to the fore in her ethnography. And I can't overstate how important her work, her research was and is. We've never really had a lot of ethnographic research done on Bahamian history, Bahamian people, there are very few names that you can call, Dr. Gail Saunders being one of them, where people have spent and invested time and energy to research kind of the history of the Bahamian people and our origins. And Dr. Howard fully committed, invested herself in her ethnographic work. I mean, she traveled to the island and lived there. And I can't say how powerful that is. It's a very courageous move for a researcher to travel to an island and live for a whole year. Andros is a very large island, but it's very sparsely populated for its size. And it was just a tremendous effort for her to live there for that time frame and to absorb the culture and history of the folks at Red Bays. And before that, I mean, you had the 1930s where John Goggins traveled and wrote a few journals, but nobody, had taken that mantle of saying, hey, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to spend time. I'm going to get this sorted out. There were all sorts of sensational stories published in newspapers in the 1930s about Andros Island, about the wild Indians, and about these, folks running around in the forest with bows and arrows. And there were all these sensational stories. And people thought for a while that the remnants of the Lucayans were actually there on Andros Island. And there were all these weird newspaper articles going back and forth. But Dr. Howard really stepped in and said, you know what, I have the expertise. I'm heading there. I'm going to do this work. And because of her efforts, we now have a definitive ethnography of the folks in Red Bays. And not just Red Bays, because the people that lived in Red Bays, they have dispersed. They live in Nicholstown. They live in Low Sound. They live in the north, the south. They live in Nassau. They live all over the Bahamas. And so when you talk about the Bahamas now, when you talk about the Black Seminoles, they're not confined just to Red Bays. They're all over the Bahamas. If you know somebody with a last name Boleg, if you know somebody with a last name Russell, if you know somebody with a last name Demerit, it's very likely, if you trace their history, if you go back far enough, you're going to find someone from Andros. And so it's to have her book in my hand and to be able to pull it up and to read the stories, it's just so powerful, not just as a Bahamian, but as a scholar. And I think that her ethnographic work will stand definitively. And all of us that are aiming to continue that work, myself included, I'm standing on her shoulders. I mean, there's no way to do this work without acknowledging the tremendous effort and work that she has done. And so, I grew up in the Bahamas, went to school there, and they never told us these stories in any of the classrooms. I took many history classes back home, and they never talked about this stuff. And so now we have something. We have a foundation to build on, and that's a part of Dr. Howard's legacy. She's given us a foundation, and so well loved. When I reached out to her last year, well, again, I communicated with her very briefly from 2018, just telling her a little bit about my work, and then last year, I was approached by a lady to co-produce 4 short films about women of the Saltwater Railroad who had escaped plantations or escaped, in this particular case, the Negro Fort at Apalachicola. And we want to produce some films. And we asked if Dr. Howard would please, share a little bit of her work. And of course, she was so gracious. Even in her illness, she was bent on making sure that, her voice was a part of the effort. And we were able to get some of her statements. We weren't able to record her, unfortunately, but we were able to get her statement on her work. And of course, the films that were produced as a result, we dedicated those films to her, and they're available now on the internet for folks to watch. But, even in her illness, she was very willing to participate and support the work and to continue. And many of the stories of the women of the Saltwater Railroad are very heroic and very powerful. And she is the one that kind of introduced the world to all of the folks that we can now read and learn about. People like, Mama Marshall in Red Bays, who was, essentially the matriarch of that community. And people like Elizabeth Newton, whose son was kidnapped, Ben Newton, kidnapped in Cuba and enslaved. And Elizabeth, fled Florida, ended up in Andros, and her descendants live in Andros today and live throughout the Bahamas today. And so we owe a tremendous debt to Dr. Howard and her work, and her legacy will continue. And I was really inspired by Wendy. Thank you so much, Wendy, for offering to organize this, because it's not even so much about Red Bays and Andros in the Bahamas. There's the diaspora, where there are people of course, in Texas, and people in Mexico and Oklahoma. And so to gather everyone together like this, to bring all of the people and the stories and the legacy together, and to be able to have this conversation and to see all of your faces and to know that we're all united around someone that really gave her life to trying to understand and to make much clearer our shared history, our shared story, I think is a really powerful thing. And I believe that this is the beginning of much more work that I hope to continue, at least in my small way. One of the things Dr. Howard elucidated in her book was the distinct connection between the settlement of Angola, which is now in Bradenton. And there's a festival that happens each year hosted by Daphne Towns, who I hope that you all will get in contact with. She's on the internet. Her name is Daphne Towns. She organizes the Back to Angola Festival each year in October. And she brings people from the community of Red Bays back to Bradenton, back to where Angola, their ancestors were in Florida, to remember them and to celebrate them. But in Dr. Howard's book, she mentions the fact that when Angola was raided by the US military, there were a few names on the lists of people who were captured that ended up finding their way again and escaping and finding their way to Red Bay. So there are at least two names, Scipio Bowleg and Prince McQueen. Their names show up on the military list in Florida for the raid of Angola, and their names show up again in Red Bays. And so there's still more work to be done. There's still more connections to be made. And Dr. Howard has kind of lit the path for us to continue research and to continue to make these connections and continue to find the stories. And so a part of my life's work is going to be to share these stories, to inspire and motivate my people in the Bahamas to learn as much as they can about their history. And unfortunately, if you go to Red Bays, and in fact, Dr. Howard mentions this in her book, some of that oral history is being lost. And so it's imperative for us to be able to tell these stories. It's so important for us to share whenever we can the legacy of Dr. Howard's work, her book. I hope to get it in the hands of every single Bahamian, every single child in middle and high school looking to learn about the history. I hope to be able to put that book in their hand and say, here's a little bit of the story that you might not know. It's such an important thing. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to share just a little bit. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Stefan. And yeah, what's so interesting is the name Bowlegs, to know that name went into the Bahamas, and we also have Bowlegs in Texas. So, this history is just so amazing. And Dr. Howard helped to really shed a light on the Bahamian part of it, which we didn't know much about. So what I want to do now is read something that I wrote back in April of 2023 as a tribute to Dr. Howard. It was published in Indian Voices. In 2018, during our annual Seminole Day celebration, Dr. Rosalyn Howard was one of our esteemed guest speakers. She came to speak about an aspect of our diaspora that we didn't know much about, the Black Seminoles of the Bahamas. She was quite literally the expert in her field. During her speech, she enlightened the audience about the Black Seminoles who continued south into the Bahamas after escaping slavery. This group began arriving in Andros Bay as early as 1821. They isolated themselves, and in doing so, honed their culture, which included their own language, foods, and crafts. Dr. Howard didn't just study this group, she lived with them, and she grew to love them individually and as a community incredibly deeply. It was evident in the way she spoke about this group of Black Seminoles from the Bahamas. She was kind enough to return in 2019 with Mr. LZ, to give another speech. By this time, she had become a dear and beloved friend to our community in Texas. In 2021, when we began revitalizing our language, she was right there on the Zooms with us. We last saw her this past January, which was January 2023, at the Florida Black Historical Research Project's 185th Family Reunion, where many people had the opportunity to thank her for her work that has helped to advance our understanding of the Black Seminole diaspora. May her memory be a blessing to all who knew and loved her, and may she continue to rest in the sweetest peace. Thank you. And so for our final statement of the evening, Jamil, if you have Dr. Grace Turner's statement available, you can read whenever you're ready.
Indeed. Since Dr. Turner was unavailable to join us this evening, I'll read that statement. I was first introduced to Rosalyn Howard in 1993 or 1994 when she was still a doctoral student in anthropology at the University of Florida. We soon became good friends. She was in the Bahamas conducting her dissertation fieldwork in Red Bay's Andros, the descendant community of Black Seminoles who migrated to Andros beginning in the 1820s. A mutual friend, John W. Franklin, had introduced us. Rosalind needed someone Bahamian to assist her with any cultural queries she might have. As I also had a master's degree in cultural anthropology, that meant we could figuratively speak the same language. When I finally had an opportunity to pursue doctoral studies in anthropology, but specializing in archaeology, that caused us to become even closer. She was on a postdoctoral fellowship teaching at the University of Texas in Austin in 2000. Remember that. When I began the graduate program in nautical archaeology at Texas A&M University, she invited me as a guest speaker for one of her classes. I truly appreciated that although she now had her doctorate in anthropology, she constantly deferred to me to ask about and to verify any questions she had about the cultural heritage of Red Bays in particular, or the Bahamas in general. For me, that was Rosalind's great gift. She never allowed her anthropological expertise to position herself over anyone with relevant cultural knowledge and experience. As the only researcher to have studied the lifeways of Black Seminole descendants in the Bahamas, she was recognized as the leading academic on this topic, pardon me. However, when Rosalind was asked to comment, she would always add me in as her Bahamian cultural advisor. I appreciated that cultural deference far more than she ever understood, because I knew that this is what she chose to do, not what she was obligated to do. The last several projects regarding Red Bays that I have become involved in all happened because Rosalind referred me for the part. That has been her legacy for me, and I am honored to have worked alongside her as a colleague. Rosalind was my big sister as a Black woman anthropologist. And if you'll, that's truly moving, and to say the least, those words and those that you all have spoken tonight resonate and mean so much to me as her son. And I just want to, if I can, Wendy, have the controls one more time.
Of
Just
course.
say to show you a couple things. Because while she was doing all of these wonderful, amazing, and groundbreaking things, I just want to remind everyone that she was a great mom. And want to share, this just a little bit of what's just she was a great mom while she was doing all of this. And while she had the same curious spirit, while she lived her life with unbridled joy and unconditional love, she was always, every single day, a great mom to me. Now, if that's not multitasking, I don't know what is. And I just wanted to offer that reminder and thank you all for, frankly, sharing her with me in the time that you all had her, as well as I had her. And, like I said at the beginning, it's up to us now. And it is up to us to figure out how to best carry her legacy forward, and to honor her in everything that we do. And I know that, especially as her son, that is my wish and purpose every day.
Yeah, I definitely feel that you did share her with us. You know, um, is there anyone that would like to say anything about Dr. Rosalyn that's in any of the attendees? You're more than welcome.
Hi, my name is Daphne Towns. I'm the organizer of the Back to Angola Festival that Stefan mentioned a few minutes ago. I'm a descendant of Fred Bayandros, and I met Dr. Rosalyn in 2017 when I first saw the history here in Bradenton, Florida, and was introduced to her. And she was very instrumental in assisting me on how to move forward in organizing the festival, along with her dear friend, Vicky Oldham. So I am indeed honored to have met her, and myself and our family from Red Bay has made it one of our life goals to continue to tell the story and honor her by bringing back many of the descendants that she once lived among. And it was always her desire to bring her goddaughter here to Bradenton, and every time she tried to do it, something wasn't right. And on the year that we could have done it was the year she transitioned, but her goddaughter did come to the festival last year. And so that was our way of honoring one of Dr. Ross' wishes. And we are working on trying to help that daughter probably further education here in the United States if we can pull all the parts together, because we know that's something that Dr. Ross would have loved to see happen, because that was a part of her life goal for her goddaughter to get a good education. So I'm excited and honored to have met her, grateful to have now seen her son in person here on this Zoom. We sent him a package. I hope he got it from the festival. And thank you, Dr. Kinney, for sending us that email to letting us know that this was happening tonight. So we're honored. We're honored. Nice to meet each and every one of you.
Thank you so much, Miss Daphne. Yeah, it's amazing to know all the work that's come about because of your relationship with Dr. Rosalyn. Are there any other comments?
Well, I just
Yes.
like to thank Daphne and Vicky. That festival, or I don't know, that event is in October, I think, of this year. And it is one, if you are interested in Seminole history and the culture and the connection between African Americans and Bahamians and Bahamas, that is a must attend event. So perhaps Daphne can tell us the dates of that event, because it's an important event. It was at that event that I got my Chicharni from Mr. Wallace, and when he told me it would keep, harm away from us.
Yes. So the festival for 2024 is October 19th and 20th, and it's going to be right at the Mineral Springs Park, of course. We are deep in the trenches now, working on putting all the logistics together. So that's going to be October 19th and 20th. You don't want to miss it. This year's theme is the Great Homecoming. And the only way you're going to know how great it is, you're going to have to show up. I'm not going to tell you. So you're going to have to show up. It's going to be different from all of the other festivals. So this year's the Great Homecoming. That's October 19th, 20th, 2024 at the Manatee Mineral Springs Park here in Bradenton, Florida. Thank you.
They have all of the Bahamian food there and all of the.
Oh, yes. Yes, we're going to have all the cultural food. Actually, the fish, the conch, everything that we bring, everything comes straight from Red Bay. We try to bring a lot of the culture with us. the Bahamian desserts, they come all the way from Red Bay as well. We're going to have Mr. Wallace's son is going to be coming again. Mr. Wallace told me he has passed that on to the next generation. So his son will be here again as a wood carver. We're going to have the basket weavers again. And we're going to have Mr. Wilton Russell telling us some stories and picking that guitar. And then the great homecoming surprise, you're going to have to be here in Bradenton to know that. I'm not going to share it on this Zoom, but you're going to show up. You're going to be excited. We got the government involved again. The city of Bradenton is backing us. So we're excited. It's growing. Every year it's growing. And we know Dr. Ross is cheering us on.
Yes.
And we're going to make her proud. We're going to make her proud. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Of course, Amadou.
Yes, I didn't really want to say anything, but I think it would be unfair to Dr. Howard in this case, because as you know, Wendy, and some of you guys, we just came back from Red Bay's last month, where we took a sweetgrass basket maker to sit down with Red Bay's basket makers, and if you read Dr. Howard's book, you would know she talks about this when she took a close look at how the tradition of making sweetgrass baskets in the Bahamas tells a story of different cultures coming together. So here we are creating the composite basket that started in Sierra Leone. It's been in South Carolina. We've taken it to the Bahamas, and we'll bring it back to Georgia, having 4 different regions, making a composite basket. So in essence, sewing families back together, just like Dr. Howard talks about in her book. So our work has legs. That's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Adu. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement? Well, excuse me. I just want to say thank you to everyone who is on this Zoom. This has been, just goes to show how loved Dr. Rosalyn was and still is. I think the love that everybody feels for her is still very much alive. It never really ever goes away, I think a lot of good will continue to come from all the work that she's done. I know that Jamil will hold himself to keeping her legacy alive, and in any small way, big way that we can help. I know that you'll reach out and let us know. Because I hope that we've made it clear your mom's work has really, set us on a new path of learning who we are. Her work is so important because it's literally the only work that's out there on the Black Seminoles of the Bahamas. It literally filled in a puzzle piece for us. So it's very important to us to see where that goes. I hope that this is just the first of many more times that we'll be able to get together. Something that was reiterated when we went to Jupiter, Florida, this year for the Seminole Maroon reunion was, we're not reconnecting, we're connecting. That connection has never really been lost, but it's a matter, and it's for us to keep that connection going as descendants of these amazing people. With all the technology that we have now, we should use it to the utmost good. So, I hope this connection just keeps going. Yes, Dr. Tinney?
I'd like to read this. I put this on the program, but it's out of Roz's book that she quoted John Carew. And I just think it's such a wonderful quote about a folkloric statement that he collected when he went to Red Bay's. And it was a Black Seminole descendant who recalled to him this statement. She said, "I heard about the Battle of Seminole against Stonewall Jackson. My grandmother tell me about it, and her grandmother tell her about it long before. Stories like that does come down to us with voices in the wind. She tell me how the old ones used to talk about the look in them white soldier faces when they see black fighters looking like they grow out of the swamp grass and the hammocks, coming at them with gun and cutlass. Jackson get hurt at Swaneman. The ancestors brutalized him there. Oh God, that man Jackson was cruel. Eh? He make slaves of them who was free already for 2 and 3 generations. He sell the grandchildren of former slaves to the grandchildren of former slave owners. My old face beat against 80 odd years. But when Jesus of Nazareth decided to send Mantop to carry me to the great beyond, wherever my blood seed scatter, they will spread the word about how Black and Seminole ancestors fight side by side at Swanee. And Roz said, the fact that this history has survived numerous generations demonstrates that the historical relationship with the Seminole Indians of Florida is a critical element in the crucible of Bahamian Black Seminole identity construction, and it is cogent testimony to the meaning of heritage. It is. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Thank
that
you.
was perfect. Yeah, that was perfect. So this has been recorded. I'll make sure to upload it. We've been uploading it to YouTube. It seems the easiest way to make sure that it's preserved in some way that people have open access to all of our recordings. So I'll make sure to let everybody know once it's up. It should be, I should be able to do it by tomorrow. But there's no way I can say thank you enough to everybody that's on this Zoom. So thank you so much for taking the time out to be here. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And if I can just add one last quick note, again to thank everyone for sharing the Dr. Rosalyn Howard that you knew with me. It means so much because there's so much of this that I was not present for, and it means the world to hear it from all of you. I am going to be attempting to collect more of these stories. So I'm sending you all through the chat my emails. And of course, if you're not able to see that or copy down just now, Wendy, be pleased to share those with you.
Yes.
I would like to be in touch with everyone here to talk about my mother, and as I collect more history of her work and her influence and her legacy. So this is something that's going to be a long-term project, but this is a wonderful start. And I just want to thank again every single person here for participating.
Yes, thank you. All right, everyone. So again, thank you so much. And until the next time, everyone take care. And, let us know if you have any questions or anything. We'll be happy to, get you in touch with Jamil if you didn't get his email or any other questions that you might have. Okay. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good evening. Oh.
Great. Thank you.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Sorry, I had to jump off and jump back on, but I made it. All right.
Good night. Peace, everyone. Nanny.
Be well.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Have a good evening. One
You
love.
too.
You do the same.
Isn't that something? It's all right. In memory of.